Hello, and welcome to ASB TDC TV, a product of a partnership between the University of Arkansas Small Business and Technology Development Center and the Northwest Arkansas Council's Small Business Emergency Assistance Program. In this series, we're talking with small businesses, experts, and ASB TDC consultants about the relevant and right now topics and solutions for small business. I'm Amy Robinson.
And I'm Chris Case, and today we're here with Mervin Jebaraj. Jebaraj, did I pronounce that right?
It's Jebaraj, yeah.
Jebaraj, I love it. But from the Walton College of Business. And so can you tell us a little bit more, because I know there's a lot more letters with what you do and where you're at, but tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, so the Center for Business and Economic Research has been in the, well, it wasn't called the Sam M. Walton College of Business then, it was just called the Business College, College of Business, since about the 1940s, actually. So I haven't been there that long, but this center has existed for, continuously operated the entire time, and we serve the state by providing, good economic analysis, information, data, to everybody that has some nexus with the state, whether that's government or nonprofits or businesses or, it doesn't matter. As long as you have something to do with the state, we will work with you guys. And so, it's essentially meeting the land-grant mission of the university to provide public service, in this particular case, economic analysis and information to everybody. And we'll talk about this, I'm sure, at some point. A lot of what the center used to do in the 1940s was provide data in written reports and hand-drawn graphs back when that was a thing, before the internet. So
before the internet.
Yeah.
One of the things that, not necessarily before the internet, but one of the things that CBER is very well known for is the economic forecast. Once a year, you are in a room, maybe not this year, in a room full of people, 1,500 people, and you give the analysis of the local Northwest Arkansas, the state, and the national economic forecast. And that's a huge event that everybody looks forward to. I think one of the things we wanted to talk to you about today is, forecasting is really difficult to do at this point in time. And so we are wondering if you can give us a little bit of information on how predictions are very hard to do, analysis is hard to do, data is hard to assess when everything that has happened in the past, which you usually bring forward to do analysis with, this is something that's never happened before. So when you are looking at economic climate, especially for small businesses, I think my very first question is, how do you do that? And then the next question is, how are things looking?
Yeah, and there have been several recessions in our country, so we have data on what recessions look like. And so this is a recession, like previous recessions we've had. It's the difference between this recession and other recessions is recessions happen over a longer period of time. So the last recession, which was very severe between 2007 and 2009, lasted from December 2007 all the way to June 2009. And we didn't, officially know we were in a recession until sometime in June 2008. So, businesses close and business slows down over several months, as opposed to in this recession, one day mid-March, everything was fine. I mean, it wasn't fine, but like everybody assumed everything was fine and businesses were open. And the next day in mid-March, everything was closed. And with that, all the business sales and people lost their jobs and income and so on and so forth, which happened overnight. And that has never happened in the way we operate our economy. Recessions take a while to take hold. And the loss of jobs and business closures happen over a longer period of time and at a much slower pace. So the stuff we learned from that recession, those recessions, some of those are useful lessons, but some are simply things that were not relevant to this particular pandemic. And so when we talk about making forecasts, we attempted some very rudimentary sales tax forecasts for the state. And we realized that restaurants and bars and hair salons and movie theaters and gyms and all of these places were closed. starting in mid-March, there were, sales went from, whatever they were to zero in many of these instances. We tried to attempt to, forecast sales tax for the big cities to understand what will happen to the budget. And we came up with some fairly drastic scenarios. What we hadn't accounted for was that, a couple of weeks into the pandemic in late March, the federal government did come through with nearly $2.5 trillion worth of federal aid to a variety of businesses, individuals, et cetera. For comparison, how quickly they acted. So the previous recession, the Great Recession, was between 2007 and 2009. There was a stimulus bill that happened in, mid 2008, and another one that happened in January 2009. The one that happened in January 2009, the total cost of that stimulus was $800 billion. This, in 2 weeks into the pandemic and closures, was $2.5 trillion. So there were problems. I mean, you guys have talked about PPP loans and how that was dispersed and everything wasn't hunky-dory, it wasn't great. But there was a lot of money being pushed out of the economy. And so, from what we thought would be really drastic sales tax returns or cuts to cities, didn't pan out as much because there was this huge tranche of money made available, $1,200 checks to households, $2,400 to most households. And in particular, the $600 per week unemployment boost to workers. And that really mattered a lot to workers that lost their jobs. In any other recession, people that lose their jobs, their unemployment only pays about 45% of whatever they were making. So getting that $600 was a huge boost. And all the evidence that we've seen is that that $1,200 check and those $600 weekly payments made a big difference, not only to households, kept them in their households, but actually made a difference to businesses, both large and small. Unfortunately, most of those effects went to larger businesses than smaller businesses, but smaller businesses saw some amount of that money as well.
Absolutely. Well, and so just where we are right now, we had that influx, and now there's a lull right now at this moment. There's a lull in that, maybe there's some on the horizon. It probably will not be at that same level. PPP funds are expended. Idle funds are still there, and those are longer term loans. But if somebody needed that in the short term, so we kind of have had a short term fix. So how does that look? How does that look moving forward?
Yeah, so I think, it was very good that the federal government came up with $2.5 trillion in March. They set the deadline for all of those things at the end of July. They've known since the end of March.
It was all going to be better by then.
Yeah, no, I mean, it should have been better by then. I think, what other countries did better than what we've done here is that they also spent a lot of money in stimulus measures. But importantly, they spent a lot of money, not nearly as much as it would have cost a stimulus, to test and trace, have enough quick testing supplies, enough tracing capacities so that, the pandemic is still here. Even countries have gotten this right. South Korea, Germany, pick your favorite country to point to. New Zealand was a great case. It still pops up. But not at the level that you have it here in the United States, to where it is still, very much like it was in the early days, where you have really high levels and people are still very afraid to go out. Most of these other countries, even though you have, increases in case rates, they're able to test and trace fairly quickly. So they are able to quarantine all the people that might have been exposed, test them quickly, and then let them carry on with their lives if they're not testing positive. We're not able to do that here. And so, yes, that $2.5 trillion might have been enough, and we wouldn't have needed nearly as much in the second go around if we had controlled the pandemic, but we haven't controlled the pandemic. So people are not going to restaurants. People are not, some people are clearly going to bars, but not enough people are going to all of the bars. People are not frequenting small businesses as much as they would because they're afraid legitimately that they will get ill from being indoors around other people. So
We're moving into the winter months and back to school and some of those things. So what do you use as your measures now? And very specifically, if you will kind of help us focus in on Northwest Arkansas small businesses and what you're using to analyze information and economic numbers and kind of what that's starting to look like.
Yeah, so the only piece of good news I have in all of this is something that I guess matters a lot more to people like me that deal with a lot of data than the general public, is that, typically in any recession, like we mentioned, stuff closes slower, and it doesn't matter that you wait for information to be quarterly or monthly release of employment numbers and retail sales, et cetera, that, for the month of July, your information shows up late August, right? I mean, today we got the unemployment information for the state as a whole for the month of July, and it's August 21st, right? So in previous recessions, that doesn't matter the pace. This one's very different in the sense that, one day things are closed, next day we're opening something, we want to see what the effect is. So a lot of data, new forms of data have been made available. Some of the data that I've been using is from a website put together by some researchers that aggregates credit card processing, debit card processing data from retailers, aggregates payroll and other HR services that are provided to smaller businesses. So on two sides, you look at consumer spending side of what they're spending money on, where they're spending money, and then on the smaller business side, you see how many businesses is using daily payroll processing services, HR services, to give you an idea of how many small businesses are open in our region, in our state, to give you an idea of how small business revenues are looking like in our region, in our state, and then where consumers, obviously from the credit card information, where they're spending money. Are they spending it at big box stores? The answer is yes. What types of small business stores were they spending money in? Where they spent, they were spending money in smaller retail stores initially, but that has dramatically declined since the unemployment benefits got cut off. And by and large, people never returned to entertainment, recreation type facilities. Never, some more sales were happening at leisure and hospitality industry like restaurants, bars, and hotels, but not nearly enough to make those businesses viable. So the good news is that I have, or people like me who are interested in this data, have access to data that runs up until the middle of August, and we don't have to wait until some point in September to get that data. The bad news is that most of that data is not very good. So.
Well, and that seems like a very quick turnaround from, July 31st, and then the spigot was slowed down, and people go back to the big box stores where things are less expensive, and they start tightening the belt and budgeting again, which we know affects our local small businesses.
Yeah, there's a very distinct, in the spending pattern, a very distinct drop off the last week in July, because depending on when your payments started, some of them got cut off before the end of July in that last week, and then everybody else got cut off the last week of July. And you can actually see a small dip and then a big dip in the spending. And, like smaller restaurants didn't do well. Other recreational facilities did not do well in small businesses, but small business retail stores, we're not doing as well as the big box stores, but they were doing better until the last week of July, and then they did get cut off, and you start seeing businesses close again, not permanently, but at least temporarily. But those temporary closures end up becoming permanent at some point, and that is a worry that a lot of people have. So
if some more funding comes in, then that could trend back up again. And then just kind of in the world of, is there a bright spot? What are you seeing just based on historical data and recessions and rebounds, and when things do get back on track, without being able to predict? The most unpredictable factor here is COVID. But what do you see? When do things start trending upwards, and very specifically, what can small businesses look for, prepare for? Generally speaking.
And then I would like to add to that too, Mervin. Yes, if there's any way that we can have, people, small businesses have access to the data, not the in-depth data that you have, but where can we all go to get some of that data and a better understanding?
Yeah, a lot of the data is available. It's fairly easy to use and fairly simple to understand. It's the website's called tracktherecovery.org, and they put together all these data sources. They update them every week. So you can actually, it's a week old as opposed to being a month and a half old, the data that you would need. And it's very, I mean, it depends. So if you're in Northwest Arkansas, obviously Benton and Washington County data is available because the counties are large. So basically there's information for the state as a whole and then large counties. So we have information for, some counties in Arkansas and definitely for Benton and Washington County. What that tells us, unfortunately, is that the other thing that this data is telling us is the spending varies by household income, and that low and middle income households are actually spending more money while they were getting the unemployment benefits. And so while households were receiving unemployment benefits, low and middle income households were the ones going out and sustaining small businesses, large businesses, going out and spending money. Higher income households that are largely kept their jobs but are working from home are spending so much less money than they used to, and definitely a lot less money than low and middle income households. So January and February, high income households spending more than middle and low income households. Starting in mid-March, that reversed and is maintained that low level up until the most recent data that we have for the first week of August. And what that means is that businesses in low and middle income zip codes, small businesses, were doing better. They had higher revenues. They were open more until the unemployment checks got cut off. And businesses that were located in high income zip codes were doing worse during this entire pandemic because their customer base was largely at home and not utilizing the services. So while you're, both Benton and Washington County, more than 40% of the workforce is still not at work, which means that they're, some of them are unemployed, but a lot of them are working from home, which means there's a whole slew of services that people are not using anymore. If you're not going to work, you're not hanging out with your coworkers, going to lunch.
Coffee shops. I spend so
Coffee
much less
shops,
coffee shops now.
meetings. I haven't used the laundry service in God knows how long.
Yes.
It's just, there's, childcare services are not being used. There are whole bunches of, entire categories of consumer spending that people spend money on while they're going to work that is just not happening at this point. And so in a way, smaller businesses in Benton and Washington County, because these are higher income regions than the rest of the state, smaller businesses in Northwest Arkansas are doing worse than they are in other parts of the state, in like Crawford County or Sebastian County or places like that, just because so many high income folks are working from home and plan to work from home through at least to the end of this year.
That's amazing. That's very good data and very good, and again, it's not all sunshine and roses, but knowledge is power, right?
Yes, it is.
and knowing kind of what some of those trends are and what some of the things that everybody is seeing is extremely useful. So is there anywhere that we can make sure that we keep track and keep on top of things other than Chris,
Track the recovery.
the rapid recovery, but how do we keep track of CBER, and do you have anything coming up that you want us to know about?
Yeah, we haven't announced any events. We'll probably do an online webinar at some point in late September or October that we usually do with the Northwest Arkansas Council to release the State of the Region report. Obviously, this one's going to look very different, and it's probably just going to be one of these Zoom webinars, but that's coming soon. Our website is cber.uark.edu. I have a Twitter account that I post information on that is updated a lot more than our website is, for example. But those are the ways you can get in touch with us or follow us for information.
Fantastic. Mervin, this has been enlightening and heartening in some ways, knowing that we've gotten through something like this before, and we will again. So thank you for joining us. And if you are joining us via video or just listening in, if you have a suggested topic, a question that you need answered, someone you'd like to hear from, or a story you'd like to share, please contact us at bizhelp@uark.edu. That's BUSHELP@uark.edu, and put TV in the subject line. If you're interested in benefiting from our free one-on-one consulting assistance, please sign up at sbtdc.com www.uark.edu. Thank you again, Mervin. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Bye.